Rabbi Teller, welcome to the program. We're at a point where probably 51% of the Jews live in Eretz Yisrael today. The Talmud says that every Jew should always live in Eretz Yisrael. Why? What was the Talmud saying? Is that really true that every Jew should always live in Eretz Yisrael?
Absolutely. The Brisa and Kesuvos and Kufyu and Amud Beis that you're referring to is actually part of the Mishnah and the Gemara's response to a kol malalin there, Yisrael, ve'ena kol motziin, which basically solves a problem between a husband and wife who basically one spouse, I have to say spouse because people think that the man is the one who would bring the woman in those days, but actually the Mishnah talks about both, and Rashi specifies that a person can bring up his spouse. The halacha actually brings, even in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, that either spouse can force the other to come to Eretz Yisrael. And the reason for that is because there is an obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael. Otherwise, you would never go so far as to break up a marriage that we know. I think Chaya Wachbran in Homebound Israel mentioned that even by a sota, we erase the name of Hashem in order not to break up a husband and wife so quickly. We're very careful about that. But when it comes to Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, it's the relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this is in the shame of Chaya Wachbrad. So we have to understand that this mitzvah that's mentioned 86 times in the Torah, more so than any other mitzvah in the Torah that I know of, possibly even twice as much, almost twice as long as the amount as Avodah Zarah. So when we have a mitzvah that's mentioned so many times, it's basically the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is deeply connected to Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. And the Brisa continues and says, V'al yador b'chutz la'aretz, and he should not live outside the land, even in a city that's majority Jews, which basically kind of turns the tables on our perspectives of a flourishing, large, robust community in Chutz La'aretz with yeshivas and supermarkets and kosher galore and everything that we have. We would think of that as a tremendous, wonderful thing. We should be building houses in Chutz La'aretz. We should be growing that community. Well, the Brisa comes to teach us that no, absolutely not. We should not be growing that community. That community should be shrinking, and we should be growing that community in Eretz Yisrael. That Brisa is brought down la'alacha by the Vilna Gaon in Yordea, Reish Samach Zayin, Halacha Pei Daled, Sif Katan, Kuf Samach Aleph. There he says clearly that we go according to the Brisa.
If a person should always live in Eretz Yisrael, why? What you mentioned 86 times the Torah talks about this mitzvah, but why? What's the significance of living in Eretz Yisrael if we don't have a Beis HaMikdash and we're still in Golus, we don't have a religious government, we still have difficulties in Eretz Yisrael? Life is so much sweeter in Chutz La'aretz when we look at the Gashmias aspects of it. And today, I would venture to say Eretz Yisrael is just as good in Gashmias, if not better, because we'll leave that to the end. I'll explain to you why you have the best restaurants, you have the best wine here. If you love eating kosher, you could probably eat at a new restaurant every single day of the year, and a good restaurant for years straight. There's more kosher restaurants here, so Gashmias is definitely better. But why? What it wasn't v'chilecho mi Peretz? We asked about Moshe Rabbeinu. What's the reason? What do you think? What's your? Not really what you think. What's your source for the reason why Hashem mentions this 86 times? The reason why the Gemara says forever. That means even in the exile, we should always be yearning to get back to the land.
Well, my first thought is the Ramban. The Ramban in Parshas Bamidbar, in Parshas Maseh and Bamidbar in Lagnag 33:53. There, Numbers 33:53, the verse, V'arashtam etz haaretz v'shavtem ba, ki nasati lechem es haaretz l'reshes osa. That pasuk, that verse tells us that we have an obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban learns that it's now a mitzvah's aseh, that you have a positive commandment from the Torah to live in Eretz Yisrael. And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh on that verse states, Mikan samchu loimar hakol malalin the Eretz Yisrael. He refers to the Mishnah. That Mishnah, of course, is where that brisa tells us, hey, where do you have the authority to break up a marriage with financial penalties on the one who wants to stay outside of Israel? Where do you have the authority to, one, place financial penalties on them, two, break up the marriage, force a divorce in this case,
Can I
where
ask,
there's
is that applicable today?
Yes, of course.
That means
The
that
first,
if somebody in a marriage, I don't suggest this, but if somebody were to want to go to Eretz Yisrael, they would be exempt from paying their ksuba. Is that correct?
yes, and the other way is they would be forced to give a get and pay the kasuba if the woman either didn't want to leave Eretz Israel or she wanted to go to Eretz Israel from outside the land. Brought down Meforish and Eben Ezra and Hey over there, halachas Gimel through Hey. So there it's Meforish Shulchan Aruch. The difference is that there were issues in the past where certain spouses wanted to get rid of the other one. So what would they do? They'd fake out the Chachamim. They'd go to Beis Din and say, I want to go to Eretz Yisrael. And then a year or two later, they'd find them, running around in the supermarket in Walmart. And then they got upset. I'm giving the example of America, but they basically had Ramayim. And with that, they were worried. The Ramah brings this halacha. He basically comments on this in Eben Ezer, saying we're worried about the Ramayim, we're worried about the tricksters. Besides that, if you have a case where someone is be'emes, yearning to go to Eretz Yisrael, and we know that we've investigated it, then yes, they would. But that's a last resort where you can't give the chizuk to the other spouse to realize that really the emes is we all belong in Eretz Yisrael. And the goal is not necessarily to break up the marriage, but rather to give chizuk to the other spouse that's really not on the same madrega when it comes to understanding the importance of Eretz Yisrael. That's not the go-to, meaning the first step is to really elevate the spouse who's weaker in this area rather than to resort to divorce. But in a case where you don't have the agreement and they've made all the efforts on, to help the other spouse understand the importance, then in that case you would be forced into halacha.
So how would you convince the spouse? What would you say? Let's say you had this couple, God forbid, and by the way, it's not uncommon. I had several people contact me and say that they were in this exact situation.
It's very normal because when you think about a spouse, like marriages, anybody who's married, for, a given amount of time, you can take the spouse and say, hey, are you the same as your wife? And they say, absolutely not. We're polar opposites half the time. I don't know how many times. Why are they opposite? Why are they different? The answer is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mezaveg zevugim. There's an interesting story about a Roman noblewoman who once said she went to the Chacham in her times 2,000 years ago and said, now that after the Kriyas Yamsuf, what was God, what does God do all day? So he answered, he's mezaveg zevugim. She goes, well, since Kriyas Yamsuf, he was busy with that. It's been many, many years. It's been, thousands of years that he's been doing this, meaning why is he taking so long? Mezaveg zevugim. She goes, I can do it too. She took 1,000 avodim and she took, 1,000 of her slaves and said, you will marry this one, you will marry this one. So basically she set everybody up in an overnight shidduch. No, nothing, no talking, whatever, you're going to marry this one. She just appointed them. The next morning, okay, she came by to see how it's going. And there was one with basically missing an arm, and then another one with an eye missing. And this all men, by the way. This is the men that were missing these limbs. Okay, so you can imagine. So when we talk about mezaveg zevugim, Kadosh Baruch Hu matches whoever it is together. It's not an accident that you found this husband and wife, and they're different because they elevate each other. They complete each other. And that's what we find. I don't know about you, but that's what I find in marriages, that you have big differences because each one brings to the table a chizuk that the other one doesn't have.
So what would you say to the spouse who doesn't want to move to Israel? Give me the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. Tell me why the Torah is telling us 86 times. Tell me why the Gemara in Ksubas tells us a person should always live in Eretz. So before you answer that, I just want to add in one caveat. This video, Be'ezrat Hashem, will be on the channel called Hidabroot. And Hidabroot is a outreach and in-reach program. And the Rabbi Zamir Cohen said on the Parshas Noach, I saw on his weekly pamphlet from Hidabroot, he said that Ezer Kenegdo means a helper. A woman was God created a helper, which is the opposite. And he says something astounding. He says that if one thinks that it means that we have two sides, that the husband perhaps is very quick and the woman is very slow, or the woman is very quick and the husband's very slow. So we think that they would both examine each other's ideas on every situation and they would come to an agreement on what to do. And it wouldn't necessarily, so he says somebody who lives like that is actually missing the whole point. The whole point would be for each person to be able to accept the other person's reality and make a change within themselves, as opposed to just coming to an agreement on every situation if I'm right or the other person's right. And that's kind of what you're saying over here. But let's go back to the question. What would you tell the person? I'm going to give you as much time as you need. What would you argue? What would you say is the reason why the Torah holds Eretz Yisrael in such esteem, with the philosophy of attraction rather than promotion? You know, telling people that they have a chiyuv to do it. We have a chiyuv to do pidyon, peter, chamor, perhaps, if we want to do all the mitzvahs. But people aren't going looking for a donkey and getting the firstborn and doing the mitzvah of that, which is amazing mitzvah. And it is an incredible mitzvah that we're able to accomplish. But what would you say would be the reason that this person should want to live in Eretz Yisrael today?
So in the Chumash, we have to kind of, break it down to its simplicity. And I think we have to discuss what is the essence of Torah. And in the words of Rabbi Yerucham Alevi in his Sefer Das Torah, he expresses that Eretz Yisrael, in the first Rashi in the Torah, it's basically talking about Eretz Yisrael. So why did Rashi bother teaching us about kibush haaretz and conquering the seven lands, and then Goyim telling us we're thieves and we're going to answer back to them, no, it's Hashem's land and he decided that we should be living there? It's a strange way to open up the Torah when we're talking about Bereshis, the creation of the world itself. Why does Rashi go into this discussion about Eretz Yisrael? So Rashi is immediately telling us, Chumash and Rashi is like the basis, a foundation of learning. We start out children with Chumash, with Rashi. So I'm going in a more foundational route here to kind of get back to basics. So when we talk about being a Jew, obviously Torah is a very important part of that. We've kept the Torah scroll in perfect shape for the last 3,300 years. And anyone who says even a slight os or nakuda off will be corrected when they make Kriyas HaTorah. So if you ever been in shul and you hear people say slightly off, and then in the crowd there's a big murmur, and say, no, it's not that. The verse is like this, right? So what does that teach us? That teaches that Torah has been preserved in perfection for 3,300 years, and this is the exact same Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. So when we're reading Kriyas HaTorah, we're literally reading the word of Hashem given to Moshe. And not only are we reading it, but in these words contain messages for life. The word Torah is hara. It is a message and an instruction, just like a parent instructs a child. HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructs Klal Yisrael how to be not only a Jew, but to be I would say more than all the Goyim, but Am HaNivchar. We were given a specific task, a specific mission. And our mission in life after 120 years is certainly not to, let's say in Yiddish, the chaparain on all the Gashmias, to grab all of the latest, super puffs, makaj, rucksack, whatever you're looking for in the exile. That's not the ikar, to grab all the new latest styles or whatever it may be, but rather the ikar is after 120 years, you'll be asked, Tzipisili Yoshua, did you seek out like Geula? Did you try to change the situation the terrible situation that Klal Yisrael is in. If we look at the whole entire picture, it's not so, rosy and perfection of tranquility that a Jew that walks through the streets of the entire world is respected and is not attacked, and a person feels safe in their home and outside. That's not the case anymore. Certainly not anywhere, almost in the world. I would say the exception would be parts of Eretz Yisrael that a Jew feels more comfortable. But again, that's a feeling. The Torah itself is the word of Hashem. And given that it's the Torah, if we look at the basics, we can take the Torah and say, what is its essence? So Rabbi Yerucham Halevi in Sefer Das Torah says that the entire Torah from Bereshis until Le'enei Kol Yisrael, from the beginning to the end, is like one daf Gemara. And he says the words, and the sugya of that daf is Eretz Yisrael. He goes further and says, and the neshama of Kol Torah Kula is kibush haaretz. Now, this is an outstanding statement by itself, meaning the soul of the entire Torah is conquering the land. He gives a reason for this. And he says that the reason is that you make a place for the resting of the Shekhinah, Hashras HaShekhinah. In other words, you make it possible to build the Beis HaMikdash. That allows the Shekhinah to return to Klal Yisrael. That allows all of the 613 mitzvahs to return to Klal Yisrael. And Rabbi Yerucham Halevi says that's the reason why Rashi tells us, Shekavashtem Artzos Shiva Goyim, Rashi goes in and discusses Kibush Haaretz in the very first Rashi of the Torah. That it's Kibush Haaretz is the neshama, not Talmud Torah, not Gemilas Chasadim, not Nichum Avelim. All of these great mitzvahs of Chesed, Talmud Torah, none of them are the essence. The essence, according to Rabbi Yerucham Halevi, is Kibush Haaretz, meaning coming to Eretz Yisrael, conquering the land, building the Mikdash. This is the goal. This has to be front and center in the goal. We shouldn't have, our goal is a little bit fuzzy, I think, nowadays. It's not taught in a very clear manner. We have to know, what is our goal as a Jew? Why are we Am HaNivchar? What are we chosen for? We are chosen to come back to Eretz Yisrael, to fix the Chatayim that made us lose Eretz Yisrael, and rebuild our Mikdash, to bring back the Kesel Yoshna, to bring back the crown of Torah to its former glory. This is our goal.
So if I interject, so what you're saying is that it's no longer a question of the way Rabbi Yerucham Halevi is saying is that the goal of Judaism is actually this process that we have the ability to do today for the first time, because 100 years ago, Israel wasn't inhabitable. And it's interesting that I noticed that last week we read Yisrael, the portion of the Torah that describes the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And we read from Isaiah 6, which is the first prophecy of Isaiah. And when Isaiah comes up to heaven and he sees God sitting on his throne, and his garment or his chair fills up the heichal, fills up the temple courtyard, and he asks God, what's the prophecy? After God asks who's going to go, he says, I'll go. He says, the prophecy is that the land will be desolate. You will give prophecy, nobody will listen, people will see things, they won't get the message, and then the land will go desolate, and then the land will start producing fruit. And then there will be a tenth of the Jews left, and there will be a rebirth. And I find it interesting that we read this on the week of that we give the Torah. Obviously, its relationship is both, I think, with the kol on Moshe's lips and the kol on Yeshua on Isaiah's lips that purified whatever sin he might have. But ultimately, the message, the way Rabbi Yerucham is saying, is really a pasuk in Yeshayahu. That Yeshayahu, his first prophecy, he comes up to Shemayim, he sees the Kisei HaKavod Ram V'Nisa, and his first prophecy that Hashem tells him is going to be a Golus, and then there's going to be a Kibbutz Golius. And if we go back to the complications of Mitzrayim, the way Yosef was sent into Mitzrayim, and what Moshe Rabbeinu was dealing with when he was leaving Mitzrayim was taking Atzmos Yosef, bringing back the bones, bringing back Jews to Eretz Yisrael. And that was his love for Eretz Yisrael to come back to Eretz Yisrael. He davened 515 prayers to come into Eretz Yisrael. But what you're saying over here is something even more than that. You're saying that Eretz Yisrael today is the culmination of all the work and the yearning that we've done, all the times we've mentioned it in Shmona Esrei, every time we say the Birchas Hamazon, every time we daven, we face Eretz Yisrael, was all to get to this moment when we can return. But perhaps, this person whose wife wants to move, or he wants to move, and her husband, this complicated situation, will say, life in Chutz La'aretz is much easier for me. I need a parnasa, I need all these things. So I'm asking, is there something about Eretz Yisrael today which is different than it was maybe when Rav Moshe lived, that would make a person want to come to Eretz Yisrael more?
Absolutely. The yeshiva system has been developed in the last 60 years since Rav Moshe wrote his famous tshuva on Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael. And not only that, but the entire economy. The economy in, let's say, where people are in many places are shrinking. The empires are crumbling. The French, British, United States, they're all crumbling empires. And you can see it in the decay in their economy and the streets that people walk through, what they look like today. Filled with murder, mayhem, chaos.
I know, but I think I got off the top. I asked the wrong question. Let me rephrase this. Maybe we'll edit that out. I'll rephrase this.
No, I'll go back into Parnasa because
we'll go into Parnasa because that's already that's secondary things. I want to talk about just about Eretz Yisrael as a Jewish value, not just as a Jewish value, as the Jewish value, as the way you're saying it. You're saying that it's not just that Eretz Yisrael is like a mitzvah you could do. You can put on tzitzis, you could not put on tzitzis, you could do pidyon peter chamor, you could not redeem the firstborn of your donkey. I mean, and these are trivial things, but you're saying that this is the mission of the Jews. You're saying the whole Torah, everything that God gave Bereshis, he gave us, created the world. And the Medrash says this. He says, Bereshis, Bishvil, the Jewish people, which are the Rashis, we are considered the Truma of all nations. We are the Bechor of all nations, and Eretz Yisrael is the Bechor of all sustenance in the world. If it's good in America, it's because there's Torah in Eretz Yisrael. And so that part of the equation, what is the reason that Hashem wants us to come to Eretz Yisrael? What is accomplished by us coming to Eretz Yisrael? And you're saying it's the mission of coming to Eretz Yisrael. So
I'm saying that Kol Torah Kula Toliba, the entire Torah rests on it. The exile was never meant to be forever. It was a curse. It was one of the four things that Hashem regretted creating, like the Gemara in Sukkah. It states that Nun Zayin Amud Beis in Gemara Sukkah states HaKadosh Baruch Hu regretted creating four things. One of them was the exile itself. And according to the Marsha, all four things he regretted creating relate to the exile. The exile is not a natural state, but an unnatural state. And if a Jew ever walks outside and all of a sudden he's in the middle of wherever street and a goy screams to him and screams, "Get out of here, you don't belong here." And he looks at him like, "What are you talking about? Why are you being so cruel that you should tell me that I don't belong here? You're racist." And they don't understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has many messengers, that he doesn't want you to be outside of Eretz Yisrael. And in order to get you to understand that, well, Kriyas HaTorah during, Monday, Thursday, or even Shabbos, that everybody has access to Kriyas HaTorah in Shul. And there he says, "V'rashtem et haaretz v'shavtem ba," and it's 86 times over, and it keeps repeating itself. All you have to do is listen. And once you hear Hashem's word, you don't need that person coming telling you you don't belong here. There's so many signs that they understand that. But unfortunately, we are not taught that. We are not taught how important Eretz Yisrael is in order to be a Jew. And therefore, we are taught that if you really do well, meaning you're sitting in kollel or whatever it may be, or doing gemilas chasadim, you have a gamach, whatever. And these are wonderful things, by the way. I want you to know that sitting in kollel and learning and keeping Torah is fantastic. Making a gamach and gemilas chesed is a sign of a Jew. Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Gonli chasadim. They're three signs of the Jewish people. This is all wonderful, but bring that to Eretz Yisrael. Sit and learn in Eretz Yisrael. Bring your gamach to Eretz Yisrael.
There's been a change, and we could pretty much take away history up until the point when most Jews are in Israel and say that now we're in a different stage. So don't come back to me with saying, well, the Chafetz Chaim didn't live here, even though he bought a house and built in Petach Tikva and tried 4 times to come to Eretz Yisrael. But, the Gedolim 100 years ago were living in a different reality, and today there's a new reality. But let's go back to the same question that we keep going to, which is, maybe what's the core value of Eretz Yisrael that Hashem is looking for? Like, what's this? It seemed kind of funny, and I had this conversation the last 2 weeks ago. I was in the old city. I was visiting my parents, and we had a simcha there. We were on a rooftop, and I'm talking to somebody who's not so religious, and he asks me, what about Eretz Yisrael? Do we have to take out all the Palestinians over here? Do we have to dismantle the rock, the Dome of the Rock? How is this all going to unfold? And I said to him, very simple, when the whole world recognizes that Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jews, they will want to come and build the Beis HaMikdash for us. And like Rabbeinu Bachya actually says, that Melech Edom, if that's Trump, I don't know, but he says Melech Edom will build the third Beis HaMikdash because he destroyed it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. What is the core value over here in Eretz Yisrael that Hashem is looking for? What's the essence of Eretz Yisrael? Is it really just seeking out a resting place for Hashem? Getting myself uncomfortable, like you said? Is that it?
Well, in essence, what is Torah and mitzvahs? Because if we take a step back and we look at our connection to Torah and mitzvahs, that was brought at Har Sinai, when Hashem held the mountain over us and said, keep my Torah or I'll bury you under the mountain. Har Sinai wasn't this event that people think that it was a glorious, love fest. It was initially, we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, but Hashem went further and he took the har over our head anyway. Meaning we already said, whatever you do is good for us. We accept it. We don't need to see every single part. Na'aseh v'nishma means that we accept first. That Kabbalah of Ol Malchus Shemayim came first. So why did Hashem need to put the mountain over our head? The answer is it may be challenging for us in the future. And if I put the mountain over your head and say, I will return the earth back to so and vo, meaning I'll return the earth back to chaos and emptiness, if you don't keep the Torah, then that makes it a little bit different. It makes it a little bit more obligatory, if you want to look at it that way. Not only that, but in Parshas Nitzavim, I think this is not emphasized enough, but the children of the Dordeah, the ones that went into Eretz Yisrael with Yehoshua, Moshe took them all, made a mechitza, walked them through, and made a bris. The bris was that they will keep Torah for all generations, that their children are sworn to keep the Torah. And this is important to know because it wasn't just from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he chose us as an Am, but we also chose to have our own children carry on in our footsteps. And this is a bris that we have kept for 3,300 years, an unbroken chain, or you and I wouldn't be discussing mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael at all. Who knows where a Jew, obviously you see where Jews end up when they lose connection to Torah. But the Torah itself, because it goes out of its way, and look at the mitzvahs that Torah, mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael pushes away. It pushes away Kibud Av V'Em, pushes away the mitzvahs Yibum.
What about Shabbos? I think the Shulchan Aruch says in 4 places, in Aruch Chaim, in Even Ezer, in Choshen Mishpat, 4 times it discusses Shabbos. I saw in your video with Michal Weichbrod regarding the mitzvah of Einig Shabbos and the mitzvah of building, buying of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. You can buy a house on Shabbos, Amir La'akum, and these things show that Shulchan Aruch says that it's a mitzvah. Not only is it a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah that could be docha certain aspects of Shabbos, and that gives us, there's no other mitzvah, maybe pikuach nefesh, but there's no other mitzvah that we say, okay, usually you can't purchase, like you said, a paperclip on Shabbos, but here you can do this on Shabbos. So I understand it's significant, but I'm still edging towards, is the significance just that we could seek it out? And I'll explain. Let me clarify this. The Meraglim go, there's 12 Meraglim, and Kalev decides to break away, and he goes to Maras HaMachpelah, and he goes there, and he breaks down and starts crying, and he says, Hashem, I don't want, Rashi brings this, he says, I don't want to fall with the Atzas Meraglim. I don't want to think like the Meraglim. What were the Meraglim thinking? Well, the Meraglim thinking was that we can't do it physically. Like everybody who comes to a Mat Beit Shemesh and looks at all the Kolel people and say, they must be stealing. They can't do it physically. And I'm like, yeah, there's a miracle going on over here. And they don't want to accept that miracle, so they say they must be stealing. But the Meraglim all said it can't be done physically. And Kalev, what does he do? He says, I agree, it can't be done physically, but I'm going to go to Maras HaMachpelah, I'm going to go to Kivrei Avosav, I'm going to go to the tomb of the patriarchs, and I'm going to go to Hebron, I'm going to ask Hashem to take away my eyes. My eyes are not seeing correctly. My mind isn't thinking correctly. So it seems like Kalev, he had this Ruach Acheres, he had this different idea inside of him that he wanted to be able, he knew that his mind was with the Meraglim. He's like, I totally agree with everything you say, but I know it's wrong, and I'm going to daven to Hashem to change my mind. So, to me, it seems like talking logically to Kalev wouldn't work. If it would have worked, then Yeshua would have said to Kalev, listen, this is like you said, it's the tafkid of the world. We only left Mitzrayim, when Natan Sharansky said, "Let my people go," but he forgot the Avdani, and we should serve him. We serve Hashem and Eretz Yisrael. So if it was just that, then why didn't Yeshua just tell him, about the importance of Eretz Yisrael? It seems like Kalev still didn't get it.
Well, Kalev actually, according to the Medrash, took out a sword when they didn't want to take the payros back, and said, either you go through me or you go and bring the payros, meaning he was going to fight them to the death.
That Medrash switches it around. Let me just repeat this Medrash for the viewers. The Medrash says that when Kalev saw that the Meraglim did not want to bring out big grapes, he stood in front of them and said, I want you to bear witness to the rest of the world, to all of Bnei Yisrael, that this is Eretz Yisrael's fruit. These are macro fruit. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want people to think that it's really good in Eretz Yisrael. And then Kalev pulled out his sword and he said, you're going to have to kill me. If you don't bring these big fruits, I'm going to kill you. And they ended up bringing them. Okay. Yes.
Right. So I think you mentioned a number of points, and I wanted to get back to some of them. One of them, interestingly enough, about Harabayis and building the Mikdash and having the Goyim want to, or Edom involved, our mitzvahs, according to the Chazon Ish in Yordei Samech Hey, are to remove the non-Jews who are not Ger Toshav, not wait for them to want to respect us, or and this is brought down also by the Minchas Chinuch and Lo Yeshu Ba'artzecha Pen Yachti Osech Ali, the pasuk in Shemos in Exodus 20, in Chaf Gimel Lamed Gimel 23:33. That verse states that they are not allowed to live in our land. We don't wait for them to kind of wake up and smell the coffee that the Jewish people are the chosen people, but rather we actually physically remove them. That is the mitzvah, and that's actually the Maisa according to the Minchas Chinuch on Mitzitzari Daled. That's a positive.
And that would apply in Gaza today, that we would have a mitzvah today to remove the Palestinians from Gaza. It's not politically correct. I don't know if I'm going to leave this in. Maybe YouTube will.
I call them Frankistinians, but I don't use the word Palestinian because the Jewish people were considered Palestinians.
Okay, let's rephrase that. So you're saying there's a mitzvah to remove the goyim from the ger. Someone who's a ger toshav is a default, somebody who is in the land already. A ger means a convert. A toshav means a resident. That means that today we have a movement around the world called Bnei Noach, the children of Noach. There's many listeners who are Bnei Noach. These are people who follow the 7 Noahite laws. Some people say that they're Talmudic, but I would argue that when Noah was asked to bring kosher animals into the ark, what was God asking? What was a kosher animal? Obviously, there was an oral Torah even back then. There were commandments that people had, and they're like not killing, not not to be immodest, to set up judges and court systems. And there's some minor differences between them, but a ger tosha, someone who does follow this, I guess it's some sort of conversion, actually. It's not just that they're a Gentile. A person who is a ger toshav is considered someone who converted, I guess, to the nation, but not to the religion. Am I correct?
It's interesting because every non-Jew were given the mitzvahs as, Noach was given, basically, but they lost them. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah states that they lost those mitzvahs. So when they adopt them, when they actually physically go and adopt them and say, I will be keeping them, and they actually do, and they're serious, and they do it because it's Torah's Moshe that, describes the format of those 7 mitzvahs, not from their own, desire or own, intelligence that they realize that these are, let's say, ethical, but rather that they do it because this is the word of Hashem in his Torah. Then they would get a status of ger toshav, but not according to the Rambam. So it's important to note that the Rambam doesn't accept them until the year of Yovel. And the only thing that's makel, I would say, is the Kesef Mishnah, which agrees with the Ravid, who basically made a stretch in the Rambam to say that no, we won't kick them out. The Kesef Mishnah really believes
but you
that
agree that the Rav agrees that Eretz Yisrael, the work of Eretz Yisrael, and this is where it gets interesting, because what you're saying is that God gave us, he didn't give us what was that, Somaliland?
Yes, Somaliland, yes.
He didn't give us Somaliland, like
or Uganda.
Yeah, he didn't give us Somaliland, which would have been very easy because they love us in Somaliland, and they love the Israelis. But he gave us the only place where there's, and he said you have to take out Vairashtem, and you have to throw out the inhabitants. Now, unpolitically correct, and like you said several times already in the video, that the first Rashi, Rav Solomon Isaac's 11th century from the town of Worms in Germany, he starts, and he's the foremost translator, the commentator on Tanakh by far. Nobody comes, every single Jewish Torah has Rashi in it. It's very rare you'll ever find one without it. Even if it has other interpretations, Rashi is it. And he starts out saying that if anybody would ever come tell you in Jerusalem or Eretz Yisrael doesn't belong to the Jews and that you've stolen it from other people, tell them that God gave us the Torah. And if he gave us the Torah, he gave us this land. And this is like, in the beginning, you would say like, well, they don't know what. I'll explain the genius of what this argument is that 5 billion copies of the Bible have been sold. I had a video on this recently. 5 billion copies. That means that 5 billion people believe that the Torah was given on Sinai. Christendom and Islam both accept the revelation at Sinai as being true. So it would be safe to say that if you agree to that the Jewish people should at least be the compass to the interpretation of what the Torah is saying for the value. And the way you brought Rabbi Yerucham HaLevi, that Eretz Yisrael is the message of the Torah, that the one message of the Torah is to remove the people from the land, enter the land, and build a temple for God. And the difficulties that we have are actually the whole point. It's not that we can't fulfill this until it will be so easy. If it was easy, that would defeat the point. That's what Gan Eden is. Gan Eden is like you mentioned the Gemara in Sukkah, halalu bachim, halalu bachim. After Mashiach comes, everybody cries. It's game over. We no longer have any question about what to do. All knees will bow to Hashem. Everybody will know, all the Goyim and all the Erev Rav and all the not just the Bnei Noach, but the whole world essentially will want to join in this covenant with God, and they will at least be on a lower level because they don't have the wings, like the Zohar says, getting the spiritual high of being able to make a sacrifice. So what you're saying essentially, if I understand you correct, is that Eretz Yisrael is a sacrifice, it is difficult, and that's precisely the point.
Absolutely. It says, Shloshim Matanos Tovas, Nitnu L'Klal Yisrael. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Brachos Hayam and Olive. The Gemara states that 3 great gifts were given to the Jewish people, one of them being Torah, the other one being Eretz Yisrael, and the last one being Olam Haba, the next world. And all of them are acquired with difficulties. And that's the whole point, that if you're foreign, let's say, to Eretz Yisrael because you don't speak the language, because you don't have a job here per se, or you're not used to the culture, that means, besides the culture that could be, debatable, that you're foreign to Torah itself, because we were our natural habitat is Eretz Yisrael. We have become estranged from that, so much so that in borrowing Rabbi Ephraim Hershkovitz, he said that the reason why Gullus is a curse is because it was never meant to become the envision of a person's whole entire life, that they want Gullus. So that what happens is that the punishment becomes their desire. If you tell them you have to go to Eretz Yisrael, they're up in arms. They say, no, I can't. There's so much going on here. I can't do it. How dare you try to make me? Don't force me to go. And all of this because Eretz Yisrael is foreign and their desire is the punishment. So it became something that no longer works. Like he said, the mashal of an addict. If you take an addict on the street who's grabbing needles and putting them in their arm, chas v'chalila, and you take away his needles, he starts screaming. But if you give him a needle and say, you know what, it's good, you stay right where you are, here's a needle for you, and he thanks you for it. He says, thank you for the needle. That's the mashal that Rabbi Ephraim said, that's why Gullus is a terrible, terrible curse. And that they want the needle. They want the comfort of where they were brought up and everything. But we learn from Lech Lecha, you have to go mi beis avicha, from the place that you were born. You have to go from your father's house. You have to separate from your family. And this is the hard part. This is the nisayon that Avraham Avinu had to face, and Olim across the board face. They all face leaving their family, which I think is probably number one. If you look at everything else, people can work their parnasa out, but they can't work their family out. They can't replace their parents. They can't replace their brother, sister, their cousins. They can't replace that. And Eretz Yisrael becomes literally the separation for them. And that's why a lot of people are struggling to say, yeah, I'm not ready to go. It's because
Fleischer was on, and he said to me, he says, Aron, do never say that people are not awake. The whole world really is awake, and the Jewish world is awake. It's just like, as you said, the opportunity needs to come. If we could all just take a pill, the red pill, like in the Matrix, and just wake up in Eretz Yisrael in the Dira and be acclimated. Like, when you go deep sea diving, you have to acclimate. So he suggests coming for Yom Tovim. It's expensive. Maybe we could do an initiative to try to lower prices. Maybe we could do some charter flights to make it easier that people could come for the regalim, come to Eretz Yisrael. There's very few people who don't appreciate it. I can't imagine. And the biggest comment I get on videos about Eretz Yisrael is, I wish I could. I can't right now. I'm praying, and I pray with them. I say, please, and if you have a prayer, please leave it in the messages over here. And we could all pray for each other. And if we can't come to Eretz Yisrael today, we could help other people come to Eretz Yisrael. When my father was a child, he grew up in California, and California back then wasn't so religious. And there was a thing where you could pay money, you give $1, and they plant the tree. And if you go around where I live in Beit Shemesh, there's forests that are all planted in these trees. And these trees, this mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, planting a tree, is real. It wasn't just a campaign. Mm-hmm. It was perhaps the reason why, Hashem made this mitzvah possible, was that everybody could have a chelik, everybody could have a portion. And there's organizations that do mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, but it's all about what Yishai was talking about. And he's a rabbi, yes, he admitted to me, is that moving our vector towards Eretz Yisrael. And that's what I was hoping to get from this conversation, was hoping to understand. And what I got so far was that, yes, Eretz Yisrael is difficult. Yes, it's the purpose of the Torah, like you brought from Rabbi Yerucham Halevi. And yes, Eretz Yisrael is always going to be a challenge, to be able to ask for Hashem for the willingness to come and for the capabilities of coming. Not everybody has the schus of coming, and you mentioned that sometimes Golus has a way of taking us out, but we also talked about the importance of Eretz Yisrael as the mission of getting to Eretz Yisrael. I heard from a Rebbe of mine's Rebbe, Reb Feivelson. And he said that the whole Tanakh is the story of the Jews leaving Eretz Yisrael and going to Eretz Yisrael, leaving Mitzrayim and going to Eretz Yisrael. Everything we do, Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim, even Shabbos in the first Luchos, the mitzvah of Shabbos in the first commandments were Zecher L'Maisa Bereshis. In the second commandments, it was Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Everything's about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Pesach is about Yetzias Mitzrayim, but not just Pesach. Everything, you can't do anything that's not Zechel Yetzias. And it's all because Mitzrayim finishes in Eretz Yisrael. But it's interesting, I saw the Ramban in the Hakdama to Shmois, he says that the finish of Geulas Mitzrayim was at Matan Torah. That the Jews finished the Exodus when they received the Torah, and that happened in Sinai, that happened in Chutz La'aretz. And the Bavel was, the Gemara says that Talmidei Chachomim Hemidu Lehem Yoser B'churbona Yoser Mibid Binyonai, that we have more Torah that came out of exile, and in fact, the word Anochi, the word Anochi is the Egyptian word. And that means that Mitzrayim is not just it's not just the opposite of good. At the end of times, the Navi Yeshayahu says, Baruch Ami Mitzrayim, blessed is my name. There's a purpose to Mitzrayim, that Mitzrayim, even though at the end it will be shmama, it will be desolate, but it serves a purpose that it enables the Jews to be able to get the Torah, and the Torah is the thing that we need to be able to bring us to Eretz Yisrael. And if so, we're almost at an hour over here. I was wondering if you wanted to perhaps leave us out with a thought on this, and perhaps we could do another video at a different time. We'll do another video, a follow-up video, but in this video, we basically covered the mitzvah of, not just the mitzvah, the understanding of the deeper meaning of the value that the Torah has, and why, precisely because it's difficult. That's the point.
Well, maybe I'll save the best for the end and basically bring us back to Kriya Shema. Now, the second parsha in Kriya Shema talks all about all the good Zach and all the great things that are going to come if you keep Hashem's Torah in Eretz Yisrael. But like the pasuk says, "V'nesati matar artzachem be'ita yoreh makosh," that Hashem's going to give us rain in its proper time, and all our fruits are going to grow, right? And then it says, you're going to get all the good produce coming from the ground in Eretz Yisrael. Then you're going to have everything good. The wine is going to taste good, and it does taste very good in Eretz Yisrael. And the fruits are amazing in Eretz Yisrael. Anyone who knows the size, I once saw a fruit in Eretz Yisrael. I started laughing because it was so huge. It was just oversized. It was just like a giant fruit. You can imagine a baby, like, 4 feet tall. It was just a huge thing that I saw, and I was laughing at the greatness of the fruits that we have. And all of a sudden it says, wait a minute, wait a minute, don't let this get to your head. Don't let the Gashmias overtake you to the point where you're going to make mistakes, and then you're going to bow to other gods. This is a problem. Avodah Zarah can be, literally any form today. We don't necessarily bow to idols. We could be bowing to Chat GPTs. We could be down to AI, Gemini. We could be bowing to all sorts of ways. And I'm not screaming smartphone Gewalt. I'm not screaming that now, although it took me 20 years to get rid of mine. But the point of it is to understand Avodah Zarah means distance from the Torah. It could even mean so distant that you'll pervert the Torah in order to fit into your life. When you want to start fitting the Torah into your life, that's the problem. When Torah is basically, when you have to make sure that the Torah comes first. And the next verse, it's very important. Next verse says, Viter, it says, Vavatem mehira me'al haaretz hatoiva asher Hashem nosein lechem. This is critical. Because every day we read this, every day, Kriya Shema, morning and night, we say it in davening. Women are supposed to say this because Yichud Hashem, they're supposed to say Kriya Shema and teach us. What is this teaching us? V'avadtem mehera, that means that you are lost outside of Eretz Yisrael. You as a Jew are lost. There's a mitzvah called Hashavas Haveda. You are the Aveda. You need to bring yourself back to Eretz Yisrael. No greater Hashavas Aveda than that. And that's the concept behind Eim Abanim Smecha, that happy is the land that receives back its children, V'shavu banim legvulam, right? That Rachel cried for her children, and when we come back to Eretz Yisrael, that's the simcha and the joy that Klal Yisrael can unite together again. How much joy would it be? Don't you want to be part of that joy, that when we see each other and there are people that when you walk on the street, you know this person's from my family. I had never met them, but this person I must have been part of, connected to their family. This is my family. And you see them, you see their face, and they remind you that, wow, it's amazing. We've been lost for thousands of years. I haven't seen you. And you know that they're part of your family. You can see it in their face. And that kibbutz galius is a joy that you can't even describe outside of Eretz Yisrael until you come and live here and experience it. When you see, I heard Zmiros on Shal Shudas, Moroccan Zmiros, and they reminded me of the Zmiros that we sing in Shabbos on Shal Shudas in the Ashkenazi shul in New York City, the same nigun almost, just different, a slightly different nigun, but almost exactly the same tune. And you can imagine we've been separated for thousands of years, and yet the tradition is there. We are returning back to Eretz Yisrael. This is the Zman of Aschalta de Gula, and no longer are we in the pure, dark days of exile anymore. This is changing, and now that this is changing, the facts on the ground now make it that the full mitzvah has returned in force, that we see so many times. The Sefer HaChinuch teaches about mitzvahs, when they apply, when they don't apply, and he uses the language of roiv when the Jewish people return in majority to their land. All of these mitzvahs now come back in full force.
Tamu, taste and you shall see. Taste it. Come feel the Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. And like you said in your closing words, that when the Shekhinah was in exile, it was because Am Yisrael was in exile. But when Am Yisrael, 51% are back, where do you think the Shekhinah is? He's with the Roiv. We follow Roiv, even though, Mechdadi Tvei, the smarter people, who knows who's smarter? I don't know if I'm smarter. I don't know if we're smarter. But it's the schus, it's the ability to see the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. If you could lead us out with a minute, maybe a bracha, and thank you so much for joining us.
So, Klal Yisrael, all of us that are lost, that are outside the land, should be zoicha to me'orer in their hearts the tshuva that's needed, like Parshas HaTshuva. And the Art Scroll discusses all about coming back to Eretz Yisrael. The simplest tshuva is right on our fingertips, yet it seems as though it's so distant and just a dream, a fleeting dream, that Eretz Yisrael is out of our hands. It's impossible for us, but it's not. It's only there in our hearts. We just need to open up to Hashem's Torah and all of his mitzvahs, and desire to bring back all of the mitzvahs and end the world where we walk in fear, where all of us are scattered across different lands, different countries, and all converge on into Yerushalayim, saying now is the time to rebuild. Now we want to rebuild that mikdash. That's a much better world than the one we're living in, the one where we walk in fear, the one where we're scattered and attacked and picked off one by one. But rather, when we come back together, that will end the fear of the nations. We'll be free from the yoke and the fear that they grip us, that we're so, machnif, we're so afraid to speak out the true Torah. So when we release the Torah in itself in all its glory, and we speak of its words without fear, politically correct, we speak politically incorrect, and we say the truth of Torah, we no longer pretend that we belong in a place we know we don't in our deepest hearts, but we release that. Hashem should give you the power to release that in your heart and come back to Eretz Yisrael, because that's the only ingredient that's missing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We reached the time. Nelcha imachem ki shemanu Elokim imachem. Let us go with you. We see that Hashem is with us here in Eretz Yisrael today. We witnessed it in these wars. May we continue to see the Geula unfold before us, And Chazak v'amatz, come join us, witness, and greet Melech HaMashiach b'mher v'yameinu amen. Shavua Tov.